If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've ever been accused of something you didn't do, if you've ever watched helplessly as your life was dismantled by lies, then hit that like button, subscribe, and get comfortable. Because what you're about to hear is more than just a story of revenge. It's a testament to the power of self-preservation, the importance of trusting your instincts, and the sweet satisfaction that comes when justice finally prevails. This is my story, and it's going to make you believe in karma. The night everything ended started like any other Tuesday. I arrive home around 6 p.m., the familiar weight of my work bag slung over my shoulder, the scent of Andrew's cooking filling our small but cozy home. Chicken Parmesan, my favorite. But something was off. He barely looked up as I entered, just stirred the sauce with a wooden spoon, his back to me. The silence between us felt heavier than usual, thick with unspoken words. We ate in near silence, the clinking of forks against plates the only sound in our dining room. I tried to make small talk about my day, about a particularly challenging security breach I'd helped resolve at work, but his responses were monosyllabic. Fine. Okay. Uh-huh. Each word like a tiny door closing in my face. Then, as I was loading the dishwasher, feeling the warm water on my hands, he said it. Lena told me what you did. I turned slowly, my hands still wet, dripping onto the floor. What are you talking about? The look on his face, it wasn't anger, it was revulsion. Disgust. I'd seen that expression on his face before when discussing particularly difficult cases at work, but never directed at me. He said Lena had come to his workplace that afternoon, crying. That 2 weeks earlier, while he was working late, I had invited her over. That I'd touch her thigh. That I'd told her I'd always found her attractive. The words hung in the air between us, absurd and horrifying. I felt sick to my stomach, a cold dread spreading through my chest. None of it was real. I grabbed my phone from the counter, my fingers shaking as I pulled up my chat history with Lena. Look, I said, holding it out to him. There's barely anything here. No messages, no invitations, nothing. He refused to look, turning away as if my phone might burn him. Lena showed me screenshots, he said, his voice flat, certain. Messages from another number. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Another number? I tried logic, evidence, anything to break through whatever wall Lena had built around him. Check our doorbell footage, I pleaded. Check my gaming logs, timestamps, anything. I was online with friends that night. You can ask them. He dismissed everything with a wave of his hand. You work in digital security, he said, and those words shattered me because of what they meant. You could fake all of this. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. He had already decided. The truth didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. 9 years of loyalty didn't matter. When I refused to leave, when I stood my ground in our kitchen and demanded he look at the proof, he threatened to call the police. I'll say I feel unsafe, he said, and the cruelty of it took my breath away. So I packed a bag, my hands trembling so badly I could barely zip it closed. I walked out of the home I thought was mine, into the cool night air with nowhere to go. At 2 a.m., driving through empty streets, that was the moment my life split into a before and after. I don't remember the drive to my sister's place. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. I remember the street lights smearing into long yellow streaks through the tears I refused to let fall. I remember my phone lighting up once, an old notification, and feeling my chest clench because for half a second, my body thought it might be Andrew calling to say he'd made a terrible mistake. It wasn't. By the time Not tonight, please. Ethan was our older brother. Loud, direct. The kind of person who would have driven straight to my house at 3 a.m. and kicked the door in with his bare hands if he thought it would fix something. I don't need a war, I said. I need to breathe. Morgan stared at me for a moment, then nodded, but I could tell she wasn't letting it go. She gave me a blanket and a pillow, made tea I didn't drink, sat in the armchair until I finally lay down. But sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Andrew's face when he looked at me like I was disgusting, like I'd been secretly rotten all along. At 5:17 a.m., I picked up my phone and called him. Voicemail. I texted, Andrew, please talk to me. I can prove this is fake. No reply. I tried again at 7 o'clock and again at 9 o'clock. Nothing. By late morning, Morgan had gone to work, and I was alone in her apartment, staring at my phone like it was a life support machine. At noon, my phone buzzed. My heart leapt so hard it hurt. But it wasn't Andrew. It was Andrew's mother, Mary Ann Collins. Her name lit up my screen like a warning flare. I hesitated before answering. Hello. There was a pause, then her voice tight, control cold. Natalie. The way she said my name wasn't warm. It was the way someone speaks a word they don't like. I heard what happened, she said. My throat tightened. Mrs. Collins, You don't need to explain, she cut in. Andrew told me. I sat up slowly, the blanket sliding off my shoulders. I didn't do anything, I said, voice shaking despite myself. Lena is lying. I can show. Natalie, her tone sharpened. Lena has no reason to lie. I swallowed hard. How can you say that? You don't know. I know my son, she snapped. And I know Lena. She's like family to us. Like family. The words landed like stones. Because I'd been with Andrew 9 years. I'd spent holidays with them. I'd brought Mary Ann flowers on Mother's Day. I'd sat in her kitchen listening to stories I'd heard a dozen times, smiling anyway, because that's what you do when you're trying to build a life. And she still said Lena was family like I was something else. A mistake, Mary Ann added quietly like she couldn't help herself. My eyes stung. Please, I said. Just tell Andrew to look at the proof, the doorbell camera. You should be ashamed, she said. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone like it had slapped me. That was when something in me began to shift. Not into strength. Not yet. Into clarity. I wasn't just being accused. I was being erased. By 2 p.m., Ethan showed up at Morgan's door anyway. Morgan must have called him after all. He walked in, took one look at me on the couch, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket, eyes swollen, and his face darkened instantly. What did he do? Ethan asked. I tried to speak, but the words stuck. Ethan sat down on the coffee table across from me, like he was bracing for impact. Morgan stood behind him, arms crossed. So I told him again. Ethan's anger didn't explode right away. It built. His hands balled into fists. His nostrils flared. He exhaled slowly through his nose like he was forcing himself not to do something stupid. When I finished, Ethan stood up. That woman has always been wrong, he said. Lena? Morgan asked. Ethan nodded sharply. She clings to him like she owns him. Every time I saw her, she was watching you like you were an intruder. I shook my head. No, she was his friend. Ethan scoffed. Natalie, she's not his friend. She's a parasite, and Andrew is a fool. My chest tightened at the insult. Don't call him that, I said instinctively. Ethan stared at me like I was bleeding and still tried to protect the knife. He kicked you out, Ethan said. He threatened you with police. He let his mother call you and shame you, and you're still defending him. His words burned because they were true. I don't know what to do, I whispered. Ethan walked to the window, stared out at the street, then turned back with a grim expression. You call a lawyer, he said. My stomach dropped. A lawyer. I repeated like the word belonged to someone else's life. Yes, Ethan said. Because false accusations like that don't just ruin relationships. They ruin careers. They ruin reputations. He paused. And you work in digital security. Do you know how fast a rumor like that spreads? My skin prickled. I hadn't even thought about work yet, about HR, about background checks, about how quickly she hit on his friend could morph into she harass someone if someone decided to twist it. Ethan pulled out his phone. I have a friend who can recommend someone. I grabbed his wrist. Not today, please. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded barely. Fine, he said. But soon. That night in Morgan's guest room, I replayed every moment I'd ever shared with Lena. Her laugh and my engagement ring, when Andrew bought it, before we returned it, and agreed to wait until we were more stable. Her expression when Andrew hugged me too long. Her subtle questions when he wasn't around. Do you feel safe with him? Does he ever get tempted? Are you sure he's really happy? I thought it was concern. Now it felt like data collection. At 11:42 p.m., I drove back to my house. Not because I thought Andrew would welcome me. Because I needed to see it to make sure it still existed. That my life hadn't been a dream someone could delete in a single night. I parked across the street, heart pounding like a warning drum. And then I saw it. A car in the driveway, not Andrew's. A small white sedan with a dented bumper and an Ohio license plate frame. Lena's. It was late, almost midnight, and she was there. In my home. In the place he'd thrown me out of less than 24 hours ago. My stomach turned. I sat frozen, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at that car like it was proof of something my heart already understood. She hadn't just told a lie. She'd taken my spot, and Andrew. Had opened the door for her. I didn't go inside. I didn't knock. I didn't call. I just sat there until my chest hurt from holding my breath. Then I drove back to Morgan's and cried in the shower, so no one would hear me. By morning, I'd sent Andrew one last message. If you won't even look at proof, then you've already chosen who you believe. I need to protect myself now. He still didn't respond. And in the silence, something terrifying began to bloom. Not heartbreak. Not anger, a question. If he could abandon me this easily, had he ever really been mine? Ethan gave me 48 hours. That was his limit. 48 hours to grieve on Morgan's couch. 48 hours to stare at my phone, reread old messages, and hope irrationally that Andrew would suddenly wake up, realize how wrong this all was, and come for me. He didn't. On the third morning, Ethan showed up again, coffee in hand, jaw set. "You can't stay like this," he said, placing the cup on the table in front of me. "You're not hiding. You're dissolving." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say I just needed time. But the truth was uglier. Time wasn't helping. Time was letting the lie harden. So that afternoon, I sat in a quiet office across from a divorce attorney named Mark Feldman, a man in his late 50s with tired eyes and a voice that didn't rush. I laid everything out. The accusation, the screenshots I'd never seen, the nearly empty message history with Lena, my work logs, the smart doorbell footage showing no one ever came inside that night. Mark listened without interrupting, occasionally nodded, occasionally scribbled a note. When I finished, he leaned back and folded his hands. "I believe you," he said. My throat closed unexpectedly, but he continued gently. "That's not the most important question." I blinked. "It's not." He met my eyes steadily. "The question is whether you can ever trust a partner who didn't even look at your proof." The room went silent. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't. Mark continued. "Even if Andrew realizes the truth tomorrow, even if Lena confesses, even if everyone apologizes, this moment will always exist." He tapped the desk lightly. "The moment he chose someone else's word over yours. And once that line is crossed, it's very difficult to erase." My chest ached. What were my options? I asked quietly. "Protect yourself," he said. "File for legal separation, not as punishment, but as a boundary. If reconciliation happens, you can withdraw. If it doesn't, you're not left exposed." I signed the preliminary paperwork that same day. My hand shook while I did it. It felt like watching my life from a distance, like someone else's hands were holding the pen. The separation documents were served. A week later, Andrew still didn't call. I moved out officially 2 days after that, not back to my house, but into a one-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from work. It smelled like fresh paint and emptiness. Ethan helped me move what little I had. Mostly clothes, my laptop, a few books. Almost everything else was still in that house. The furniture, the photos, the memories. "Don't worry," Ethan said, setting down a box. "You'll get new things." I nodded, but it wasn't the things I was mourning. It was the life that no longer belonged to me. Work became my refuge. I stayed late, took on extra projects, volunteered for tasks no one else wanted. My manager noticed. "You okay?" she asked once carefully. "I'm fine, Elid." I also started going to the gym, not because I wanted to get stronger, because lifting something heavy was the only way to quiet my mind. Every morning at 6 a.m., I pushed my body until my muscles burned and my thoughts couldn't keep up. Anger helped. Anger gave structure to grief. Weeks passed. Andrew's mother called Mark's office, screaming about how I was abandoning her son in his time of crisis. Mark responded calmly that I had been expelled from my own home over false accusations and denied communication. She hung up on him. That night I sat, alone in my apartment, staring at the blank wall where a TV might go someday, and finally accepted something I'd been resisting. Andrew wasn't coming back. Not to apologize, not to explain, not to fix anything. If he had any doubts, Lena was there to soothe them, to reinforce the story, to remind him how hurt she was, how brave she'd been to speak up. I knew because a mutual acquaintance mentioned it casually one afternoon. She's been staying over a lot, the woman said. Just supporting him. Supporting him. The phrase tasted bitter. Around week 4, Ethan insisted I go out. Just one drink, he said. With a normal person, someone who doesn't know any of this. So, I met Rachel, a friend of Ethan's girlfriend, at a downtown bar. She was kind, funny, worked in marketing, asked me questions, and actually listened to the answers. For half an hour, I almost forgot. Then she smiled and said, "So, are you seeing anyone?" And I felt it. The wall. "I'm not ready," I said honestly. "I'm in the middle of a separation." Her expression softened. "That makes sense." We finished our drinks politely. I went home feeling lonelier than before. By week 8, the numbness set in. The kind where pain dulls but doesn't disappear. Like a bruise you stop noticing until you bump into something. I started planning a future that didn't include Andrew. A possible promotion overseas. A bigger apartment. A version of my life that wasn't constantly waiting for someone else to decide my worth. And that was when everything changed. It was a Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something, instinct maybe, made me answer. "Natalie," a shaky voice said. "Yes, this is Marianne, Andrew's mother." My stomach dropped. "I need to talk to you," she said quickly. "And I need you to listen, please." Her voice wasn't cold this time. It was trembling. "She was here," Marianne continued. "Lena, nothing. She'd been drinking," Marianne said, crying now, talking about how hard everything was. My chest tightened. "I thought she meant the guilt of accusing you," Marianne whispered. Then she said she couldn't stand watching you have him anymore. My heart began to pound. "She told me she loved him," Marianne said. "That she always had. That breaking you apart was the only way she could breathe again." The world tilted. "She admitted everything," Marianne said, her voice cracking. "The fake messages, the number, all of it." I closed my eyes. Vindication didn't feel like I'd imagined. It didn't feel like relief. It felt empty. "I'm so sorry," Marianne said. "I should have listened to you. I should have questioned her. You need to tell Andrew," I said quietly. "I tried," she sobbed. "He won't hear it. He thinks I'm trying to protect you out of guilt." Of course he did. I thanked her politely and ended the call. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time, staring at nothing. 2 hours later, my phone exploded. Missed calls, messages, voicemails. Andrew, apologizing, begging, asking to talk. I didn't listen. I turned my phone off and went to sleep because the truth had finally come out and it had come too late. I didn't turn my phone back on until the next morning. Not because I was punishing Andrew, because I needed one full night where his regret didn't get to speak louder than my clarity. When I finally powered it up, the screen flooded instantly. 17 missed calls, 34 messages, 6 voicemails, all from him. I didn't open a single one. I showered, made coffee, went to work like my life hadn't just detonated all over again. But around noon, Mark Feldman called. "Andrew has retained counsel," he said calmly. "They're requesting a meeting. Reconciliation discussion." My chest tightened, but not with hope. "What conditions?" I asked. "Yes," Mark said. "He wants to meet at the house." Of course he did. The house where he threw me out. The house he... Nothing. She'd been drinking, Marianne said, crying now, talking about how hard everything was. My chest tightened. "I thought she meant the guilt of accusing you," Marianne whispered. Then she said she couldn't stand watching you have him anymore. My heart began to pound. "She told me she loved him," Marianne said. "That she always had. That breaking you apart was the only way she could breathe again." The world tilted. "She admitted everything," Marianne said, her voice cracking. "The fake messages, the number, all of it." I closed my eyes. Vindication didn't feel like I'd imagined. It didn't feel like relief. It felt empty. "I'm so sorry," Marianne said. "I should have listened to you. I should have questioned her. You need to tell Andrew," I said quietly. "I tried," she sobbed. "He won't hear it. He thinks I'm trying to protect you out of guilt." Of course he did. I thanked her politely and ended the call. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for a long time, staring at nothing. 2 hours later, my phone exploded. Missed calls, messages, voicemails. Andrew, apologizing, begging, asking to talk. I didn't listen. I turned my phone off and went to sleep because the truth had finally come out and it had come too late. I didn't turn my phone back on until the next morning. Not because I was punishing Andrew, because I needed one full night where his regret didn't get to speak louder than my clarity. When I finally powered it up, the screen flooded instantly. 17 missed calls, 34 messages, 6 voicemails, all from him. I didn't open a single one. I showered, made coffee, went to work like my life hadn't just detonated all over again. But around noon, Mark Feldman called. "Andrew has retained counsel," he said calmly. "They're requesting a meeting. Reconciliation discussion." My chest tightened, but not with hope. "What conditions?" I asked. "Yes," Mark said. "He wants to meet at the house." Of course he did. The house where he threw me out. The house he... She misunderstood. "She didn't," Andrew said quietly. Lena's composure cracked. "I did it for us," she burst out. "You were trapped with her. You couldn't see it." Andrew stepped back like she'd struck him. "I loved you since we were 16, Lena sobbed. I waited. I watched. I couldn't anymore. The room went silent. Andrew shook his head slowly. "Get out," he said. Lena rushed toward him, trying to grab his hands. "Andrew, please." "Get out," he shouted. She stumbled back, hit the coffee table, then straightened, makeup smeared, eyes burning. She glared at me one last time before slamming the door. The silence afterward was deafening. Andrew collapsed onto the couch. "I'm so sorry," he said over and over. "I was blind. I was stupid." Mark placed the separation documents on the table. Andrew saw them and broke. "Please," he begged, looking at me. "We can fix this. Therapy. Anything." I finally spoke. "You didn't just believe her," I said quietly. "You erased me." He reached for my hand. I stepped back. "You threatened me," I continued. "You threw me out. You let everyone believe I was capable of something I would never do." "I know," he cried. "I'll spend my life making it up to you." I met his eyes. "You already spent it choosing someone else." I nodded to Mark. "I'm president." Andrew fell apart as we walked out. I didn't look back because closure isn't loud. It's walking away without shaking. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. No dramatic court scene, no shouting across a room, just signatures, dates, and the quiet finality of a life officially closed. I expected to feel something sharp when it ended. Relief, anger, grief. Instead, I felt light. Not happy, but unburdened, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't realize I was allowed to put down. Andrew tried to reach out a few more times in the weeks after. Emails this time. Him who threw me out of my own home had already said everything I needed to hear. I blocked his number, blocked his email, and for the first time in years, my phone became quiet. Life filled the silence slowly. Work first. The overseas position I'd once hesitated over, I took it. 6 months in a new city, new office, new air. My manager congratulated me like it was just another step forward. She didn't know it was a rescue. I upgraded my apartment, too. Nothing extravagant, just brighter. More windows, a place that felt like it belonged to me and no one else. I filled it with things I chose on my own. Furniture Andrew would have called impractical. Artwork Lena would have quietly criticized. Plants I forgot to water and replaced without guilt. Ethan visited once a month. He'd sit on my kitchen counter, drink coffee, and say things like, "You're different." "I hope so," I'd reply. One evening, about a month after the divorce was final, I ran into Rachel again. Same bar, same smile. This time, when she asked how I was, I told her the truth. "It ended," I said, "and that's okay." She nodded like she understood exactly what that meant. We started slow. No promises, no pressure, just honesty. I told her everything. The accusation, the betrayal, the way trust can fracture in seconds. She didn't flinch. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. That was how I knew it was different. As for Andrew, Ethan heard through mutual contacts that he'd started therapy, that he was unraveling what happened, that Lena had moved back to Ohio after burning every bridge she had left. I felt no satisfaction in that, just distance. Sometimes I think about that night, me standing on the driveway, staring at Lena's car, realizing my life had already been replaced. At the time, it felt like the end. Now, I know it was the reveal, the moment the illusion collapsed. Because love that vanishes under accusation isn't love. The exile, the loss, turned out to be the thing that saved me. If I'd stayed, I would have spent my life proving my innocence to someone who should have known my heart without evidence. I don't do that anymore. I choose people who trust first, who listen, who don't need screenshots to believe me. Sometimes the most devastating betrayal isn't the lie itself. It's the moment you realize someone was always looking for a reason not to believe you. The moment of truth came in that living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life I had built with Andrew. As Lena stood there, her hand possessively on Andrew's shoulder, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was it, the moment I had both dreaded and secretly hoped for. When Mark demanded she leave, I watched Andrew's face closely. The hesitation, that split second where he looked from Lena to me to Mark, was all the confirmation I needed. He was still choosing. Even after everything, even with his mother's confession, he was still torn. But then Lena made her mistake. As she walked past me, she couldn't resist one final jab. "You ruined everything." The words were barely audible, but they hung in the air like poison. And in that moment, something shifted in Andrew's expression. The fog of confusion began to clear. When he asked her to repeat what she'd said, I saw the first crack in Lena's carefully constructed facade. Her nervous laugh, her attempt to deflect. It was all so transparent now. Andrew's mention of his mother's revelation was the final blow. And then Lena unraveled completely. Her confession poured out like a dam breaking. Years of pent-up obsession, jealousy, and manipulation laid bare for all to see. "I loved you since we were 16, she sobbed. I waited. I watched. I couldn't anymore. The room went silent as her words echoed off the walls. This was it. The moment of vindication I had secretly craved but never truly expected. Andrew's reaction was almost anticlimactic in its simplicity. "Get out," he said. Not shouting, not dramatic, just quiet finality. But Lena wasn't done. She scrambled toward him, desperate, pathetic. "Andrew, please. Get out," he shouted this time, and the force of it sent her stumbling back into the coffee table. As she straightened, makeup smeared, eyes burning with a mixture of hatred and desperation, she glared at me one last time before slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. Andrew collapsed onto the couch, a broken man. "I'm so sorry," he repeated over and over. I was blind. I was stupid. But his words meant nothing to me anymore. Mark placed the separation documents on the table between us, a physical manifestation of the boundary I had been forced to create. When Andrew saw them, he truly broke. "Please," he begged, looking at me with those eyes I once found so comforting. "We can fix this. Therapy. Anything." That's when I finally spoke, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "You didn't just believe her," I said quietly. "You erased me." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back, the distance between us now feeling like a chasm. "You threatened me," I continued, each word carefully chosen, precisely aimed. "You threw me out. You let everyone believe I was capable of something I would never do." "I know," he cried, tears streaming down his face. "I'll spend my life making it up to you." I met his eyes, really looked at him for what might be the last time. "You already spent it choosing someone else." With a nod to Mark, I delivered the final blow. "I'm proceeding." As we walked out, Andrew's sobs followed us into the hallway. I didn't look back because closure isn't loud. It's walking away without shaking, without second-guessing, without looking for one last sign that might change everything. The real revenge wasn't in seeing Lena exposed or Andrew broken. The revenge was in my own transformation from a woman who had been defined by someone else's perception of her to a woman who defined herself. That was the true payoff. Looking back now, from the comfort of an apartment that is undeniably mine, filled with things I chose for myself, I can see the pattern more clearly. What happened to me wasn't just about a jealous friend or a weak-willed partner. It was about the fragility of trust and the terrifying speed with which it can be dismantled. The most painful part wasn't the accusation itself, but the realization that someone who claimed to love me could so easily believe the worst. That's the wound that takes the longest to heal. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, not what you want. I wanted Andrew to see the truth, to come to his senses, to choose me. What I needed was to see the truth about him, about us, about the foundation we'd built. And once I saw that foundation was made of sand, not stone, walking away became the only logical choice. People ask me if I'm angry, if I hate Lena or Andrew. The truth is, I don't have the energy for hate anymore. Hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I've chosen to invest that energy elsewhere, in my career, in my new relationship with Rachel, in myself. The most satisfying revenge I've discovered isn't about making others suffer. It's about thriving so completely that their actions become irrelevant to your happiness. When I think about that night now, the night my life split in two, I don't see it as an ending anymore. I see it as a beginning. The beginning of a life where I don't have to prove my worth, where I don't have to defend myself against baseless accusations, where I can be exactly who I am without apology. The worst thing that ever happened to me turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. And sometimes, that's the sweetest revenge of all. The divorce wasn't a finale. It was a door closing, and on the other side of it, I had to learn how to breathe again. The first few months were strange, kind of quiet. The noise of the battle, the accusations, the lawyers, the frantic phone calls, had been replaced by a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. In that silence, the real work began. It was the work of unlearning 9 years of shared existence. I'd reach for my phone to text Andrew about something funny I saw on my way to work, only to have my finger hover over a deleted contact. I'd cook for one and automatically make enough for two, the extra portion a silent, mocking testament to a habit I couldn't break. My new apartment, with its fresh paint and empty spaces, felt less like a home and more like a blank canvas I was terrified to ruin. The overseas position had been a lifeline, a geographical cure that worked better than I could have imagined. London was a different world. The rain wasn't a metaphor for my sadness. It was just weather. The crowds on the tube didn't make me feel lonely. They made me feel anonymous, which was a blessing. I threw myself into the work. The complex algorithms and security protocols, a welcome distraction from the chaos of my own heart. My new colleagues knew me only as Natalie, the sharp digital security expert from the States. They didn't know about Lena or Andrew or the lie that had fractured my world. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't someone's ex-girlfriend or the victim of a betrayal. I was just me, and it was terrifying, but it was also liberating. Rachel was the anchor in that new, choppy sea. Our relationship didn't start with fireworks and dramatic declarations. It started with quiet understanding. She never pushed me to talk about the past, but she created a space where I felt safe enough to do so. One evening, as we were walking along the South Bank, the city lights glittering on the Thames, I told her everything. Not just the facts of the story, but the feelings. The shame of being accused, the gut-wrenching pain of Andrew's disbelief, the hollow emptiness of the vindication that came too late. I told her how sometimes I still looked over my shoulder, how I still had a visceral reaction to the smell of chicken parmesan. She listened, her hand warm in mine, and when I was finished, she didn't offer platitudes or tell me I was better off. She just said, "That sounds incredibly hard. Thank you for trusting me enough to share it. And in that moment, I felt a shift. It was the feeling of a wound, not fully healed, but no longer infected. It was the feeling of trust, not as a fragile thing to be protected, but as a solid foundation to build upon. As for Andrew, he became a ghost in my machine. For a while, he still tried to reach out. The emails became less frequent, then stopped altogether. Ethan, acting as my unofficial information gatekeeper, would occasionally give me updates. Andrew had sold the house. He'd moved into a small apartment downtown. He was, according to Ethan, wallowing in a pit of regret so deep it's a wonder he can see daylight. Part of me, the part that still remembered the man I'd loved for 9 years, felt a pang of something akin to pity. But the larger, stronger part of me felt nothing. His regret was his to carry. I had my own baggage to sort through, and I didn't have room for his. The story of Lena was shorter and, in a way, more tragic. After the confrontation, she had apparently returned to Ohio in disgrace. The mutual friend who had first tipped me off about her staying at the house later told me that Lena had tried to spin a narrative where she was the victim, a woman broken by unrequited love who had been manipulated by me. But no one was buying it. The web of lies she had spun was too intricate, the evidence against her too damning. She had burned every bridge in our city, and now she was back where she started, alone. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a quiet sadness for a person so consumed by what she didn't have that she destroyed everything around her in a futile attempt to get it. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I got a message from Mark Feldman's office. It was a simple, professional email informing me that all remaining financial ties with Andrew had been severed. The sale of the house was complete, and my half of the proceeds had been transferred. It was a sterile, bureaucratic end to a deeply personal chapter. I stared at the confirmation number on the screen, a string of meaningless digits that represented the last physical remnant of our life together. And I felt nothing. No sadness, no relief, no anger. Just a quiet sense of finality, like turning the last page of a book you knew you'd never read again. That evening, Rachel came over, and I told her the news. "It's over," I said, and the words felt true in a way they hadn't before. She wrapped her arms around me, and we stood there in the kitchen of my London apartment, a place that was now undeniably, irrevocably home. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. I thought about it for a moment. I thought about the woman I was a year ago, broken and exiled, sitting on her sister's couch, her life in shambles. I thought about the long, painful journey from there to here, and I realized something profound. "I'm thinking," I said, my voice clear and steady, "that I'm finally free." And I was. Not just free from Andrew or Lena or the lie. Free from a need for their apologies, free from the weight of their opinions, free from the version of myself that had been defined by their betrayal. The revenge wasn't the divorce or the money or even seeing them get what they deserved. The real revenge was this: building a life so full, so authentic, so completely mine that their existence became irrelevant. And as I stood there in my own home, in my own city, with a woman who saw me for who I truly was, I knew that I hadn't just survived. I had won. If this story gave you chills, if you've ever faced betrayal and come out stronger on the other side, smash that like button.